This bill will, I have to make a note, it should be on non-consent. This bill tries to improve the situation for property owners who are damaged by construction occurring adjacent to their property. We get complaints constantly. Um, I don't like the way I said that, but it is, I mean, it's just continuous, the complaints we get from residents and other property owners who are damaged because of either shoddy work or just something that happens on the property next door, resulting in hundreds of thousands of dollars of damages, and the property owner, the damaged property owner, has difficulty getting compensated for that. This legislation would require insurance. There'll be a delayed applicability so that the building industry will have time to come into compliance. There's also a bill on the consent agenda, Fair Meals Delivery Act, which just puts in permanent basis limitations on how much delivery the delivery apps can charge when somebody wants to get takeout from a restaurant. We saw during the pandemic that that became very popular, and also that there were quite expensive fees associated with that, fees to the restaurants or to the individuals using this service. So we adopted emergency legislation. This permanent legislation is more moderate in its approach and has been worked out with the many different stakeholders. We have also on the consent agenda at the moment, a bill with the title Restoring Trust and Credibility to Forensic Sciences Amendment Act. That bill makes changes to the Department of Forensic Sciences, our forensic lab, to try to improve its ability to do its work without the, to put it diplomatically, the controversial relapses that have now occurred twice in the past decade, to strengthen the Science Advisory Board, which is being renamed, so that there is greater likelihood that the agency will adhere to best practices and address any procedural issues before they rise to the level as the last controversy did, which led to the lab losing its accreditation. So this bill should be an improvement. On the also on the consent agenda, and this is coming through the committee of the whole for markup, will be confirmation of the Director of the Office of Planning, Anita Cozart, who's been serving in that capacity for about a year. And also the council will be appointing an alternate member to represent us, represent the district on the WMATA board, a woman named Spring Worth, who's quite knowledgeable about the issues before WMATA, and will join our two appointments, Lucinda Babers and Tracy Haddon-Lowe. Ms. Worth will be the alternate. And then we have final reading on both the emergency legislation, this is the temporary version, fare free bus funding, and the permanent bill, Metro for DC Amendment Act, Bill 24-429. The two bills need to be read together. One deals with the financing for the fare free bus service that will begin next summer, taking that financing, the funding for it out of the revenue estimates that will come out later this month. And then beginning in July, we will have fare-free bus service in the district. That's on DC bus routes, and routes in DC are DC bus routes, even though there's some thinking they're interjurisdictional, they're not really. And also expanding to overnight service, 24-hour service, 12 of the busiest bus routes. All of this should be very good for district residents and also for residents who have to work late at night and rely on or have the need for public transportation late at night. The Schools First in Budgeting Amendment Act will be before the council for final reading tomorrow. There'll be a amendment nature of a substitute that just makes some, what I'll characterize as tweaks to the bill. There was some concern after first reading or at first reading that somehow we were undercutting the at-risk funding, which we're not. But with this amendment nature of a substitute, we're making that clearer in the legislation. And also expanding some reporting requirements so that the public will have a better understanding, to the extent that DCPS wants them to understand how the at-risk dollars are being used. The Medical Cannabis Amendment Act is on the agenda for final reading. There'll be there'll be an extensive amendment, not an amendment nature of a substitute, but an extensive amendment that addresses issues with regard to the unlicensed businesses that exist in the district and giving them an opportunity to get a medical cannabis license to operate legally. So that's on the agenda for final reading. And if you ask me questions about this, I may not be well-versed to respond, but we have for final reading the Comprehensive Policing and Justice Reform Amendment Act, which puts into law on a permanent basis many of the reforms that were first adopted by the council after George Floyd's murder in 2020. Some additional provisions in that legislation that came up for first reading 2 weeks ago, and final vote is tomorrow. We have about half a dozen emergency bills. New and different among those emergency bills is one entitled Tourism Recovery Tax Emergency, which Councilmember McDuffie is moving, and that bill is in response to the tourism and hospitality industry that continues to feel disadvantaged economically as a result of the pandemic, and also vis-a-vis competitors in other cities. And so this would be a temporary, and I have to emphasize, a temporary tax. If I remember correctly, it's on hotels, hotel rooms, to bring in some additional dollars that would then be used to market, exclusively to market the district in other cities, and I believe internationally as well, to increase tourism, as well as business conventions in the district. So that hasn't gotten very much attention. I think it could be a big deal. It's a temporary measure, meaning for, I don't remember precisely if it's 2 or 3, which it is, 2 or 3 years, but on a temporary basis to provide additional revenue for additional marketing. And then the last emergency on the agenda is the Housing Authority board reform. And that bill, I'm circulating an amendment in nature of a substitute in the next hour, which is essentially the same as what was before the council 2 weeks ago. But I'll remind folks, what was before the council 2 weeks ago was a bill and then a lot of amendments, some of which were in one amendment sheet and some additional amendments in another sheet. And it was a little bit complicated. I had pulled the bill at 2 weeks ago because not everyone was present, and so I will move it again tomorrow with Councilmember Bonds, and the agenda doesn't say this, but and Councilmember Robert White. There'll be a few other changes which I would characterize as minor, but they are in the direction of more participation from the public and residents of public housing. I'll take questions in a second. Let me just say that, again, tomorrow's the last scheduled meeting, legislative meeting of Council Period 24. We had an election, in case anybody missed it, in November 8th. And so the new members of the council and those who were reelected will be sworn in on January 2nd. As I'm standing here, I'm not sure I can give you the details, but I believe that event starts at 10, and then we will have our organizational meeting on January 3rd. Probably, but I can't say this for certain, that the business on January 3rd besides organizational, no, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to speculate that what legislation will be there because it may just be an organizational meeting on January 3rd. So that's the schedule. Tomorrow, January 2nd, swearing in, January 3rd, organizational meeting of the council. With that, I'm happy to take questions. Yes, sir.
So with the cannabis bill, you kind of briefly touched on the fact it would be a substantial amendment, but can you go into details on what's changing?
Yeah, I did say substantial. It's like 7 or 8 pages, so it's substantial that way. And it is substantive. It clarifies some of the issue that, around which there was some debate at first reading on what I'll call on-ramping, the unlicensed businesses. The concept is this. Uh, We have licensed medical cannabis establishments in the district. We have a very large number of unlicensed recreational cannabis businesses in the district. Some of them characterize themselves as I-71 compliant. The Initiative 71 did not speak to licensing or regulating, it did not. And just so that everyone's clear, I know you know this, Congress stepped in, I think, to try to stop the initiative. Was very clumsy about it, so the initiative became law. The use of cannabis on a recreational basis is lawful in the district, but Congress managed to block us from being able to regulate that in any way. So we have this unlicensed, I will say unlawful because there's nothing in the law that permits it, businesses that are growing. As of a year ago, it was estimated to be about $600 million a year in sales. And this is hurting the medical cannabis, the licensed cannabis businesses. The legislation attempts to help the licensed cannabis businesses by relaxing some restrictions on them and putting into permanent law what we've already done on a temporary basis, which is, for instance, self-certification by patients. The bill also, though, steps up enforcement activity, but that's where the council's been struggling. Businesses, I'll characterize them as illegal businesses that want to be legal. We want them to be legal, so they would have to get into the medical cannabis business because that's the only business that we can make legal. And so the amendment tomorrow, I would say, improves and clarifies that on-ramp for those businesses to do that. So just to make this clear, we want those businesses that want to be licensed to be able to get licensed, and we don't want them enforcement against them while they're going through that process.
Thank you for that. So then I want to ask about the hospitality bill from Councilmember McDuffie, the hotel subsidy or tax, whatever that was. That in response to the there was a council mayoral breakfast a couple months ago where the hotel. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, except I don't have the details in front of me. You were present at the mayor council breakfast. It was in October, the end of October, and there was a presentation by Destination DC. This is consistent with that. I don't know why it's taken so long, but it's taken a while to draft the legislation, and that's what's before us tomorrow. So it's an increase in the, I believe it's in the hotel occupancy tax, like a surcharge or an add-on. It's meant to be temporary. It's meant to bring in some money, and when I say some money, I have in my head $20 million a year. I don't know if that's correct, but I would say that's in the ballpark, which would then be used for advertising.
Are you expecting that to be controversial at all?
I want to say it should be, but not because I'm opposed to it. I support it, but it is a tax. But I think generally members will be supportive. Okay. Let me rephrase that. I think members will be supportive. We like the idea of marketing DC, and we like the idea of increasing tourism and helping the hospitality industry. My biggest concern is that at some point somebody will say, well, why are we making this temporary? Let's just make it permanent, and that would not be right. But that's what's before us tomorrow is clearly a temporary measure.
Thank you.
Yes, Janetta?
Just to piggyback on what Michael was talking about, I don't understand the logic to tax the hotel the hotel occupancy rate to increase it would then, I guess, be passed on to passed on to the people who actually rent the room, the tourists. So how does that work in terms of increasing tourism when you are increasing the cost for a tourist? And isn't there another way for the district to actually provide additional marketing funds, if that's what you think you need, rather than increasing a tax rate?
Let me answer the second part first, and that is, yeah, there's another way. We could wait until the budget and then find an appropriation, and we'd have to find dollars within existing revenues to do that. And that's always a competition for dollars when we have the budget before us, and also it would not take effect until probably next October. So what's before us is quicker and more certain in terms of raising revenue. You're correct. If we raise the hotel occupancy tax high enough, that will discourage tourists and convention goers. My understanding is that convention goers are more sensitive to the tax, not because the individuals are, but because the associations who put on the conventions are looking at what their cost is, or what the cost is to their members, and so they do the price comparison between cities. Destination DC has done a comparative analysis. This is what Michael was referring to, the Mayor Council breakfast, the briefing there. What's being proposed, even though I can't tell you exactly what the rate is, but it's not out of line with what other jurisdictions are doing. And in fact, there are several large cities that are doing the same thing, which is this temporary tax. So if the tax increase isn't too high, it's not going to have a net decrease in tourism.
But the tax, Mr. Chairman, is the tax then going to be?
It's paid by the hotel guest. So when you go to a hotel, I can tell you haven't checked into a DC hotel in a while. When you go to a hotel, that was meant to be funny, and you pay your bill, $200 a night or $400 a night, there will then be added to that various taxes, and one of them is this hotel occupancy tax.
Right, but okay, so a hotel then that maybe has seen a reduction of 10%, 20% occupancy wouldn't then be affected by this?
Or 30% or 40% reduction.
Yeah, wouldn't then therefore be affected by this unless they have managed to increase their occupancy, and now you are basically penalizing them for actually doing what you're hoping to do, which is to bring more people and more business into the city.
Well, yes, but the hotels don't actually pay the tax. So,
well, the people in the hotels pay the tax, which is the same thing as penalizing a hotel for increasing its occupancy and bringing more people into the city, which then would be more business for more revenue for local businesses. I mean, don't you see the negative domino effect?
Yes. But if the increase is not that high, the negative effect will be minimal. I mean, we see that with pricing all the time. We see that with bus fares, for example. You increase bus fares, you lose ridership. Depends on how much you increase bus fares. It depends on how important the bus fare is to the rider. There's a lot of research on hotel taxes, increasing it 1 or 2%. And again, I don't have the bill in front of me, so I don't remember the exact rate, but increasing it 1 or 2% probably does not discourage tourists. It could have an effect on conventions. However, as I said, Destination DC's done that comparative analysis. So again, this doesn't affect the hotel, and the Hotel Association, I believe, is supportive of this legislation. When you check into a hotel, you of course want to know what the rate is for the hotel. Let's say it's $400 a night. That does not include the taxes. The taxes are added. I think the DC hotel tax right now is around 12%. And so this would just increase it to 13 or 14%. Will that discourage? I think not significantly.
Thank you.
Ms. Brazil.
I have a couple of questions I'd like to ask you, but first I'd like to ask you about the Inspector General Enhancement Amendment Act of 2022, Bill 24-129. And when you look online, it says it will allow employees at the Office of the Inspector General to have arrest authority without a warrant. Has there been some burgeoning problem that has developed that suggests the need for this legislation? Because I have a follow-up question.
Yes, you would have to, you would do best to look at the record, the committee report, and what the Inspector General testified. I can't remember if this is within DC or outside DC. I think it's outside DC. The Inspector General brought to the council the concern that when they're dealing with certain matters, that their powers are limited, and that's what this addresses.
The reason why I'm particularly interested in this is because several years ago, the then Inspector General came to the council and got the authority for certain members of his staff to carry guns. And I and a lot of other people were somewhat alarmed because I knew the background of some of the employees over there. About a year or two later, I asked someone in the U.S. Attorney's Office, and they assured me that I didn't have to worry about them carrying guns because from the passage of the legislation, they acquired guns, but they were all locked up in a safe. So it seemed to be legislation that the IG lobbied for to increase his realm of authority, but then it was never actually executed. But you think that the committee report indicates that there is a need for arrest authority to be given to members of the staff over there?
Yes, I'm certain that the committee report or the testimony from the Inspector General attached would explain it much better than I can.
Okay, I will read it. I had another.
But let me also add that, and I'm sure you understand this, we're not talking about the Inspector General being able to go out and just arrest people. This has to do discreetly with their matters that are in their jurisdiction.
Well, I'm still waiting for a report from the Inspector General. I can't tell you when I last saw one, but that's my own personal opinion. Can I ask you about an issue about council confirmation of nominees? You have several nominees tomorrow on the agenda that have not gone through the formal council confirmation process. The first one is Springworth, who is being appointed to be an alternate on the board of the WMATA board. Not only didn't she go through a confirmation process, but her nomination, although it has a PR number, is not on the council website.
You want me to speak to Ms. Worth?
Yes.
Ordinarily, and just so everybody knows, over the weekend I emailed you with regard to some of this. Ordinarily, I have hearings on individuals. We're at the end of the council period, which is why I'm not having a hearing on her. The other measures that are a bit older, that are coming out of the committee of the whole, I had hearings on. The State Athletics Commission, Historic Preservation Review Board, the Director of the Office of Planning. I had hearings on them.
But are you moving her, well, you're moving her nomination without a confirmation hearing, and you're moving her nomination without the documents, the appointment documents even being on the council website. You can't find it.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about that. I mean, it should be on the website.
So neither citizens nor.
I'm being told by staff it's on there.
Scroll down, you will find that the page is blank.
Did you hit the link? Because if you go to the bottom of the
Yes.
page.
I've been doing this yes, I did.
Well, I know you've been doing this for years, but if my legislative director says that he can pull up the resolution
Okay, well,
And
I
you're
have my
saying you don't
computer
see
here,
it.
maybe he can help me in that regard.
Okay.
But why do you feel the need to move her nomination without a hearing? And if I am right, and the appointment isn't even on the council website, is there a particular need that you feel to move her nomination to the WMATA board at this time?
Yeah, there's been a vacancy in the alternate position for too long, so I'm feeling some impatience there. And in working with the regular members or two regular members, um, they both are concerned that if either of them is absent, there's not an alternate to step in for them. And that's been an increasing worry on their part. This position is for alternate,
Uh-huh.
and the person, Ms. Worth, is extremely knowledgeable about the issues before WMATA.
I don't know that because I can't find her nomination, but let me ask you about two other nominees that are moving forward without a public confirmation process. That's James Boggs and Karen Greenfield. Mr. Allen moved them to a vote in his Judiciary Committee without a confirmation hearing. And I am particularly concerned about Mr. Boggs, who is filling the Republican seat on the Board of Elections. And he has never been appointed to anything in the district government, so he has not been through a vetting process. And as you know, there are specific provisions in the DC Code specifying qualifications for appointment to the Board of Elections. And because there has been no confirmation hearing, there has also been no vetting to see whether or not he meets those qualifications. Given the problems we've had at the Board of Elections since 2020, and we're preparing for the presidential election in 2024, do you have some concern about moving these two nominations at this time and not just holding them until January? Mr. Boggs's nomination by the mayor does not expire until the end of February, so there's not this urgent rush to expedite his appointment.
Well, as I told you in my email, my general practice is to have hearings on nominations. Now, there are some exceptions, and you pointed out Ms. Worth as an exception. With regard to these two nominations, you would have to ask the chair of the Judiciary Committee who's moving them why he is moving them without having had a hearing. He has the right, these are on the agenda by right. It would be extraordinary. It is in my ability to keep them off the agenda, but it would be extraordinary if I were to do that. If members were to come to me and express concern and I questioned whether members were comfortable with moving forward, then maybe I would exercise that authority that I have. Otherwise, I consider that it's on the agenda by right from Mr. Allen. So that was his decision, and you would have to ask him why he is doing that. As you know, because you've been an observer of the council for a couple of decades, the committee chairs get a lot of deference with regard to measures that are in their jurisdiction. And so this was Mr. Allen's choice to do this. I can't speak to you about the qualities or what meetings or interviews he's had. I can't tell you if he's submitted any oversight questions to the nominees. You know, with Ms. Worth, I did send a letter. And in fact, she's going through the markup process. Well, these went through the markup process as well. So I can't tell you anything about the record with regard to those two.
But let me just close this out by saying that I have reached out since last week to Mr. Allen's committee staff and to Mr. Allen's front office, and they won't return a phone call. They won't respond to an email. Moreover, the issue, as far as I'm concerned, has to deal with one of the provisions in the DC Code is you cannot be involved in a political party or political campaigns and what have you. And my review of Mr. Boggs is that he is currently a member of the Finance Committee of the National Governors Association. Again, I don't know if he's currently, but that is what is currently on the website. But again, when you don't have this rush without a public hearing, all of this can be properly vetted, and there can be no questions then raised if he is appointed. Clearly, your experience with Mr. Allen is different from mine. And indeed, in the committee report on the two nominees, there is the only bio or information on Mr. Boggs is a page that was captured from his law firm. There's no indication that questions were asked of him or that they got any response. You know firsthand the problems we had in 2020 regarding the elections. You know firsthand the problems we're likely to have going forward for 2024. We had 9 precincts in the November election that had inoperable voting machines. I mean, we cannot have that again happening. So I just say that I know you want to get along with Mr. Allen, but at some point, these issues are just too important. And if Mr. Allen refuses to be responsive to inquiries about something as important as this, I don't know what we're to do. That is why I wrote to you. That's my speech.
May I have a follow-up question to her?
Yeah, yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, do you think that since you're preparing to do an organizational meeting, which I think also often includes an adjustment or amendments to the council rules, what I just heard you say is that there is no rule in the council that requires a hearing or a roundtable or some kind of public discussion regarding someone who is nominated to a commission such as the DC Board of Elections. Did I mishear you?
No, that's correct.
Do you think
our
that
rules require a hearing on bills, except emergency bills, but do not require a hearing on resolutions?
I am flabbergasted, simply because, and this is new to me, hearing you articulate this, because normally there are hearings that council members do, but that is their prerogative, is basically what you're basically saying.
Well, yeah, until I became chair, there was not a requirement that bills have a hearing.
Okay, well, there should be a requirement, given the fact that this is a $19 billion corporation, that the public is paying for this corporation, and that these people, including the ones at the Board of Elections, actually help to run the corporation. Do you not think that there should be hearings for everybody, especially on major committees like the Board of Elections, that there should be? Would you not feel the need to incorporate that in your new rules?
The short answer is no.
Okay.
I'll give it some thought. It quickly gets complicated.
Well,
So,
Mr.
for
Chairman,
example,
if I apologize for interrupting you, but here's how the public might see that. We are in an environment locally and nationally where people are raising questions about the election process, the election system, and the individuals who are actually involved in the election system. We've had 2 instances this year where the Board of Elections decided on. One was with Kenny McDuffie and his qualifications. They voted without ever looking at the historical record that the council had regarding the qualifications for an attorney general. The second was just recently the appeal of the OCF's ruling regarding Alyssa Silverman, which there is controversy about how that was managed. Now you're saying that it's okay for people to be appointed to this commission without actually having a public hearing, without regard for their qualifications, and at the last minute, so that even if you had an objection, you can't do anything about it, as a member of the public, paying for this office. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I would say that there are boards and then there are boards. And so if you're talking about the Board of Elections and you just described some of the authority that they have, or you could be talking about the commission, the District of Columbia State Athletics Commission. And I certainly will give this some thought, but it may be that not every board or commission warrants the extra step of having a hearing. As you know, the council, by our rules, cannot act on a measure in less than 15 days after publication in the register. So there's an opportunity that way for public input. These resolutions for the Board of Elections, I'm not sure when they were introduced, but I'm guessing it was September or earlier. And so they've been around for months, and folks who pay attention to the board would know that those nominations were pending. I'm unaware of any comments on them other than from Ms. Brazil. I think that's important. There has to be an opportunity for public comment, and there are different ways that folks can comment. To me, the value of these hearings, the reason why I usually have hearings, is that it's more about an opportunity for oversight. Because most of the hearings that I have on nominees, they're the only witnesses the nominee himself or herself. I see that over and over again, the Charter School Board, the Metro Board, the WMATA Board, the Athletics Commission, the Board of Industrial Trades, Historic Preservation Review Board. We had a hearing a couple weeks on that. I think we had 2 witnesses, the nominees and the Preservation League. Actually, they didn't testify, they sent a letter. So to me, the value is it enhances the opportunity for the public if they want to comment, but they can comment in other ways, and that I get some oversight done. And I would recommend that for colleagues, but it's not required, and I don't know that I want to propose that as a requirement, but I will think about it.
You will concede, though, Mr. Chairman, that the Board of Elections is not just a board or any ordinary board. This is a board that oversees who actually is qualified, not qualified, who gets dismissed, doesn't get dismissed, who actually can run for office, can't run for office. You get the point.
I'll concede that it
and
is
so,
unique.
I mean, it's not just an ordinary board.
So why don't you all talk to Mr. Allen and ask him why?
No, I'm talking to the chairman who's in charge of the council, who actually prepares the rules and regulations that the council votes on. I'm not going to go to some functionary ward member.
Well, I don't consider Mr. Allen
I know
a
you don't, but I do.
But to be that as it may, he's the one who made the decision. And you're asking me to explain or justify his decision. And
No, at this point, I was asking you whether you saw, given this particular situation, whether there's a need to incorporate something in the rules that would speak to which boards that you can just, willy-nilly appoint somebody to, and which boards do you need to really have a public hearing, a public confirmation hearing, roundtable, something where the public can make comments, or at least you can say we opened it to the public for comments. I don't even know if he could say that.
On this or a different issue? I want to follow up. Okay. Well, then we'll move on after that, please.
I know of your close relationship with Mr. Allen, and I don't mean to disparage that. But you need to know and appreciate. You say, you made this comment about, well, if citizens know about the nomination and have concerns, there were ways for them to make those concerns known. Mr. Mendelson, no, there weren't. I will tell you, I have tried repeatedly, gone through the list of people who work for Mr. Allen, both on his committee and on his personal staff. They don't return phone calls. They don't answer emails. Now, you know, as regards the Board of Elections, there are specific provisions in the code that speak to qualifications, knowledge, training, and experience in election law and procedure. There's no indication that Mr. Boggs, for example, has any of that. And as I mentioned, there is also deep concern that Mr. Boggs is on the Finance Committee for the National Governors Association. Okay? There is nothing in the committee report, that indicates any questions were asked of Mr. Boggs. He didn't even submit a statement. He didn't even have a neighbor send a letter supporting his nomination. And I can't find any indication he's ever been civically engaged in the District of Columbia. So why do we elevate him to this important position on the Board of Elections when we have no knowledge if he has any experience in election law, and if he has any conflicts as regards being on the Finance Committee for the National Republican Governors Association? I don't understand.
Okay, well, what's going to my mind is that the press conference is an opportunity for questions. So let me just see if there are any more questions. Mr. Sather.
Thanks, I have two. The first is about DCHA. I just want to clarify, it sounded like what you said is the amendment, and it might be an amendment in nature of substitute,
Yes.
is kind of a amalgamation perhaps of various proposals that have floated through around this bill, but can you specify as best you can what is being incorporated in this final version?
You are taxing my memory. Okay, so the mayor had proposed 7 members. Most of this is not new. The amendment nature of a substitute, there'll be 9 members, not 7. The mayor had proposed 7 specific people. There have been changes. As I'm standing here, I can't remember 4 or 5 are different than what the mayor had submitted. We added a voucher member. We changed the resident member. I actually think that this will be new and different. I think we might be adding a 10th person as a non-voting. The mayor had proposed somebody who was a resident of Ward 7, and there'll be somebody different from the Homeless Interagency Council on Homelessness. So there were changes in, I said 4 or 5, it might be 3 or 4 members from what the mayor had proposed. Increase from 7 to 9. Required that the board has a public input at least 1 meeting a month. I'd have to look at a list.
Did I hear you correct? You said there'd be a 10th non-voting member?
I think there'll be a 10th non-voting member.
That's new though?
That would be new.
And who, did you propose that?
I think because I'm working on a thin memory, I'd rather you wait till the amendment nature of a substitute circulates at noon.
Okay. And can you say what this 10th person would do?
Just an additional presence voice at the meeting.
Appointed by?
In the bill.
Right, but who, sorry, would this be a mayoral nominee? Would this be a council? I'm trying to.
Well, at this point, the changes to the bill are from the council, so.
Okay.
I would suggest you talk to me or talk to Lindsay after the meeting, because I'm not trying to withhold. I just feel like I might be getting out in front of what's actually happening.
Yeah, I understand. There's been a lot of changes, so I'm trying to keep track of things. The second question is following up on some of what they touched on with new rules and other things happening next council period, but what is the timeline for committee assignments and announcements around that?
I thought I was going to get through this press conference without that.
No chance.
I've called an administrative meeting for Wednesday. I believe it's early afternoon, and at that time is when I will present my recommendation. I think I'll leave it at that. The rules have a slightly longer time frame, and so those probably will not be available to the public to see until, I'm going to venture to say, the Friday before the 3rd, which is like December 30th, maybe.
You're talking about the rules for
The rules,
okay,
yeah.
gotcha. Okay.
I think you were asking about that.
I referenced those, but
Yeah.
that's helpful to know.
So
But
what the council does every 2 years with a new council period is we look at our committee structure. And there's always at least some change to the committees, some years more than other years, and committee assignments, who will be the chairs, and who are the members, and then we appoint our council officers, and I'm, of course, going to recommend continuing with the current officers, and then we adopt our rules. And the rules are an evolution from 45 years ago.
Sure.
So they're based on what we adopted 2 years ago, which was based on 2 years before that.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Ms. Brazil?
Can you detail what the confirmation process, if there will be a confirmation process for these people who are going to be appointed, either the original board when it's seated or for any vacancies that come up?
Are you talking about for the Board of Elections?
No, for DCHA.
Okay. For the Housing Authority, the concept behind the legislation is analogous to establishing a control board. And so the current board will be replaced. And the legislation that we have specifies positions. For example, one of the positions is the Director of Interagency Council on Homelessness. But then the bill also specifies the individuals. So I believe it names the director or chair of the Interagency Council on Homelessness. So it's like a twofer. It's such and such a position, and then in a separate section, this individual who happens to fill that position. So we're making the appointments.
So in the legislation, people are being appointed,
Yes.
but wait a minute, in the legislation, representing an organization is being seated on the board, or is a particular individual being appointed? What is it?
Both.
So if that individual is no longer available to be on the board, then the organization maintains a seat
Well, it's not an organization.
representing a group.
Representing a background or a constituency. So I'm hesitant to specify, because I don't have the legislation in front of me, the resident positions. There are two. One is a voucher holder. So I can't remember the exact language, but in one section, we'll say section A, it says voucher holder.
Right.
And in section B, it says the name of the person who is a voucher holder. And
So-
then if that person steps down, they would be replaced by another voucher holder.
So to go back to my question, will this original control board that's being put in place for DCHA be subject to any confirmation or review?
Not for the initial appointments.
Okay. If a vacancy occurs, what does the legislation provide in terms of filling the vacancy?
Well, this gets back to Michael's question. This is a change from what the mayor sent down. It actually has in it an appointment process. So it would have to come to the council for confirmation. And then we can have a press conference about it. Just a couple more questions. Mr. Rice.
There's going to be a change in the in school budgeting, and at one of your meetup with Mendo sessions, you said the DCPS, if I understood and remember correctly, has 3 budgets. Can you elaborate briefly?
Yeah, they have at least 3 budgets. So there is the budget that is in the budget book that comes to the council. There is the budget that they publish on their website,
And that's
which
different?
I think is dcpsmybudget.com, something like that. And then there's the budget that's in our financial system, the government's financial system.
And they differ from
Yeah,
each
they
other?
differ.
Which controls?
Well, it's not that they're inaccurate or that they contradict each other. It's that they confuse the public. So one budget will include their attribution to a school of system-wide costs, which is different than a budget that simply speaks to the dollars that are there in the school under the control and direction of the principal. So to illustrate what I just said, I'm pretty sure school security comes out of an account that's called school support. So take a school, Stoddard Elementary School, and let's say they have a budget of $5 million for their teachers and counselors and principal and so forth. But then DCPS will say, we have some security guards at Stoddard, so let's see how much we got 3 people over there, and then they will put that in the second budget. And so it's not that it's inaccurate, it's just a different statement, but very confusing to the public.
Is this the way any other DC agency is
No.
run?
No. And then the third budget is our financial management system, and I can't remember. That, I think, has less that's attributed to the school. If it sounds confusing, it is. I'm happy to share with you a letter that I got regarding a particular school that broke down the differences between the budgets.
And will your change continue this?
Well, we had long talks about, when I say we, my office had long talks about what to do here. I'd like to say they can only have one budget, but if you think about it, I mean, really, is there a value in prohibiting somebody from restating a budget? So what we're doing in this legislation is to say that the budget created by this legislation is the budget that actually is under the control and direction of the principal. It will be called the school's first budget. No other budget can be called the school's first budget. So if a parent wants to know what a school's budget is, go look for the school's first budget. And that's what the school has.
And will that include the security?
No. No, it'll be the money that's under the direction and control of the principal.
Is that then a fourth budget?
No, it shouldn't be, because I think we're also requiring that it's in the budget book.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to have to wind this up. It's the last question.
Following up on the DCHA issue, Mr. Chairman, with respect to the evolution of this legislation, you initially said you had wanted a smaller board.
Yes.
You're not getting that. Obviously, now there's talk of, you mentioned possibly another 10th position, even though it's an ex officio kind of role. We had an ex officio role in the other, in the original board that is being replaced, or commission that's being replaced by the council. I'm beginning to not see any difference between what you are getting ready to do now.
Are you asking a question?
And yeah, I am.
Okay.
I'm beginning to not to see much difference between what you're getting ready to pass now and what was there. Can you say what is the difference and how you think this will lead to the reform that is being demanded to a certain extent by HUD? That's the question.
Well, it's going to be a smaller board and it's going to be a new board. The only holdovers are the council's appointee, Mr. Skinner, and 2 of the Housing Authority residents, a voucher holder and a tenant. That's 3 of the 4 holdovers, and then a 4th person who was recommended by our appointee to be held over. So 9 of the current members would no longer be on the board. It's a smaller board, and I think looking at the caliber of the folks who are being proposed, that we'll see some folks who bring some good expertise to the table.
So it's inconclusive, or did you just not respond to the question about how do you see this new board, which if it's 10, it's only 3 people
Well, it's
smaller
9.
than the previous board. How do
It's
you see
9.
that leading toward the reforms? How do you see that this new board actually being able to do the reforms,
It's
given,
9, it's not 10, it's 9. There
Well,
will be 9 voting members. I'll repeat, 9, and that's smaller. Would I have liked a smaller board? Yes. This is a political process. There was a demand for more tenant voice. When I say tenant, I mean housing authority clients. And so we doubled what the mayor proposed. That would get us a nice even number of 8, so we added another person. That's part of the process is it's still going to be a smaller board, and we'll see. But the hope is that this will help a lot. I want to thank you all very much. I have a 12 o'clock deadline, so I have to kind of run out of here. If anybody needs something from me, talk to Lindsay, please, and thank you.
I am at-large council member Alyssa Silverman, Chair of the Committee on Labor and Workforce Development. Today is Wednesday, December 14th, and the time is 3:03 p.m. We are meeting via the Zoom internet platform, and this meeting is being broadcast on the DC Council website at www.dccouncil.gov and on Facebook at www.facebook.com/CM Alyssa Silverman. I'm calling to order this meeting of the Committee on Labor and Workforce Development. Today, we are holding a public roundtable on PR 24-1079, Compensation and Working Conditions Agreement between the District of Columbia Government and the International Association of Firefighters Local 36, AFL-CIO, MWC Approval Resolution of 2022. Collective bargaining agreements are the contracts between management, and that is, in this case, the district agency, which would be the Fire and Emergency Medical Services Department, and employees that set the terms of compensation and non-compensation matters for a fixed number of years. The parties negotiate, and then after reaching agreement, send the agreement to the council for review and up or down approval. The collective bargaining agreement before this committee today will be deemed approved on December 19th, 2022. The collective bargaining agreement between the International Firefighters Association, Local 36, and the Fire and Emergency Medical Services Department covers the period from fiscal year 2021 through fiscal year 2024. That is, it is retroactive to October 1st, 2020, and it ends on September 30th, 2024. This agreement covers more than 1,800 members of the district's emergency response workforce. Through the agreement, these employees will receive retroactive wage increases of 2.5% for fiscal year 2021, 3% for fiscal year 2022, as well as a 3.5% increase in the current fiscal year and 3.5% in fiscal year 2024. We will begin today's roundtable by hearing testimony from Dabney Hudson, who is president of IAFF Local 36. After Mr. Hudson, we will hear from our government witnesses, Aisha Alt, Chief of Staff at the Office of Labor Relations and Collective Bargaining, and James Hansen, Assistant Fire Chief with the Fire and Emergency Medical Services Department. We welcome additional testimony from the public. So if you would like to submit testimony on this collective bargaining agreement, you have until this Friday, December 16th at 5 p.m. You can submit testimony by emailing labor@dccouncil.gov or call us and leave a voicemail, you would call 202-455-0153. And if you leave a voicemail, please remember to spell your name and speak slowly for the transcription.